Get your black ass away from that counter. Officer Michael Harris shoves Judge Margaret Johnson against the pharmacy wall. The 69-year-old woman's prescription bottle scatters across the floor. Her reading glasses crack against the tile. I'm just getting my husband's medication. Shut your mouth. Grandma Harris twists her arm behind her back. You people always have some sob story. The handcuffs slam shut. Margaret gasps as metal cuts into her wrists. Customers record on phones. Some laugh. An elderly black woman brutalized in Georgia's wealthiest zip code, treated like she belongs in chains. Please, officer, you're hurting me. Good. Maybe you'll learn your place, but Margaret Johnson has spent 40 years learning her place, and it's not on her knees in front of a racist cop. When she speaks again, the words that come out will teach Harris exactly who belongs, where. What she reveals next destroys his world. Margaret Johnson had started this Tuesday like any other in her 48 years of marriage coffee at 6 a.m. with Robert, her husband of nearly 5 decades, toast cut into triangles, the way he liked it since his stroke 6 months ago. The morning news played softly in their midtown townhouse, where magnolia trees line the sidewalk and neighbors still wave from their porches. Robert's heart medication ran low yesterday. Margaret noticed the orange bottle sitting nearly empty on their kitchen counter, next to the pill organizer she filled every Sunday. His cardiologist had been clear, miss. Even one dose, and the consequences could be fatal. I will get it. Today, she'd promised, kissing his forehead before he settled into his reading chair. Robert smiled, the left side of his mouth still drooping slightly from the stroke, 48 years together, and she'd never broken a promise to him. The pharmacy on Piedmont Avenue sat in the heart of Midtown Atlanta's most affluent district. Margaret had been coming here for 3 years, ever since Robert's health declined. The pharmacy staff knew her by name. David Miller, the manager, always asked about Robert's progress. The young technician Emily Clark remembered. Margaret preferred the large print labels. This wasn't some inner-city drugstore where tensions ran high. This was Midtown, where federal judges shopped alongside Fortune 500 executives, where a woman like Margaret Johnson belonged, even if some people couldn't see past the color of her skin. Margaret arrived 15 minutes early. The pharmacy was busy, but orderly. She took her place in line behind a businessman, checking his watch, and a young mother bouncing a fussy toddler. Normal people living normal lives, unaware they were about to witness something that would shake their comfortable assumptions. She wore her good navy blazer, the one she'd bought for courthouse appearances back when she still worked full-time. Reading glasses hung from a silver chain around her neck. A retirement gift from her law clerks, her wedding ring caught the fluorescent light as she reached for her purse to check Robert's insurance card. The prescription number was memorized. RX4471892. Listen. Oprah, 10 milligram, take 1 daily with food. Robert's lifeline in a small orange bottle behind the counter. David Miller worked efficiently, filling prescriptions and answering phones. He glanced up when Margaret approached, ready with his usual warm greeting. Tuesday afternoons were typically quiet. A good time for conversation, for asking about Robert's physical therapy progress. Margaret had no way of knowing that Officer Michael Harris was parked outside radio, crackling with dispatch calls. No way of knowing he'd received orders to increase arrest numbers this week. No way of knowing that his supervisor had specifically mentioned the pharmacy as a high-activity zone for prescription drug abuse. She certainly couldn't know that Harris had a quota to meet. 3 arrests before his shift ended, 2 down, 1 to go, as Margaret opened the pharmacy door. The small bell chimed overhead, the same sound she'd heard dozens of times before today. It might as well have been a warning bell, because while Margaret Johnson saw a routine medical errand, Officer Harris saw an opportunity, and he was about to make the worst decision of his career. Officer Michael Harris enters the CVS with purpose in his stride. His body camera blinks red, recording everything standard procedure. Though Harris has learned which angles work best for his reports, Margaret Johnson stands at the prescription counter, reading the medication label. Carefully through her glasses, her lips move slightly as she checks the dosage instructions. 10 milliliters. Belden's lisinopril once daily with food. Robert's cardiologist had emphasized the importance of consistent timing. Harris notices her immediately, an elderly black woman taking too long at the counter reading the label too carefully. In his 13 years of policing, he's learned to spot the signs. Drug seekers always study the bottles like that, checking for resale value. "Excuse me, ma'am?" His voice carries authority across the quiet pharmacy. "I need to speak with you." Margaret looks up, startled. Her hand instinctively tightens around the prescription bottle. "Yes, officer, what are you doing with that medication?" The question hangs in the air. Other customers pause their shopping, sensing tension. David Miller looks up from behind the counter, his expression shifting from routine professionalism to concern. "I'm picking up my husband's heart medication," Margaret explains calmly. "Listen, Robert, he takes it daily." Harris steps closer. His radio crackles with static. "Your husband's medication? Or are you planning to sell it?" Margaret's eyebrows furrow. "Sell it, officer. This is for high blood pressure. Why would anyone don't play dumb with me?" Harris's voice rises. "We know what goes on in these pharmacies. Elderly people picking up prescriptions for other people. It's trafficking." The pharmacy falls silent except for the hum of refrigeration units storing vaccines. Emily Clark, the young technician, stops counting pills. The businessman in line pulls out his phone. "Not to record, but to step away from potential trouble, officer." "There's been a misunderstanding," Margaret says, her voice steady, despite her racing heart. "I have my husband's insurance card, his ID, and a medical power of attorney." "Everything is legal," Harris checks his body camera. Adjusting the angle slightly, that's exactly what someone running a pill mill would say. "Turn around and put your hands on the counter." Margaret's eyes widen. "I beg your pardon, you heard me." Hands on the counter. "Now, David." Miller clears his throat. "Officer Mrs. Johnson is a regular customer. She comes in monthly for her husband's medication." "We've never had any, sir." "Step back from the counter. This is police business." Harris reaches for his handcuffs, the metal clinking against his duty belt. Margaret's hands begin to tremble, not from fear, but from a familiar anger she's kept carefully controlled for decades. "Officer Harris," she reads from his name tag. "I'm going to ask you to reconsider your actions. Are you threatening me?" Harris smiles, the expression cold because that's obstruction. "I'm not threatening anyone. I'm simply suggesting turn around, hands behind your back." Margaret doesn't move. Around them, customers begin pulling out phones, some to record, others to call for help. The young mother with the toddler hurries toward the exit. "Mom." "I won't ask again." Harris grabs Margaret's shoulder, spinning her around. Her prescription bottle falls to the floor, pills scattering across the linoleum like dice. Margaret's voice remains calm despite the roughness of his grip. "Officer." "You're making a serious mistake," Harris laughs. A sound without humor. "The only mistake here is yours should have stayed home." The handcuffs click open in his hands behind the counter. David Miller reaches for the phone to call his district manager. This situation has escalated beyond anything in his training manual. Margaret Johnson feels the cold metal approaching her wrists and knows she's reached a crossroads. She can submit quietly. Let this young officer have his moment of power and deal with the aftermath. Later, she can speak the truth that will change everything. The decision she makes next will destroy more than just Harris's afternoon. The handcuffs snap shut around Margaret Johnson's wrists with a metallic finality that echoes through the CVS. The sound cuts through normal Tuesday afternoon conversations. Like a gunshot, customers freeze mid-step. The gentle hum of air conditioning and soft radio music can't mask the sudden suffocating tension. Harris yanks Margaret's arms tighter, forcing her shoulders back in a position that sends sharp pain down her spine. At 69, her joints protest every movement, but she refuses to cry out. She's endured worse indignities in her lifetime. Though none quite this public, there we go, Harris announces to the growing crowd. One less drug dealer on the streets. His voice carries satisfaction, the kind that comes from what he believes is a job well done. Margaret feels the cold metal cutting into her wrists, where her circulation slows, her wedding ring catches against the cuffs, pinching skin that's grown thin with age. David Miller abandons his post behind the counter, his pharmacy training. Forgotten in the face of this nightmare. Officer, please, Mrs. Johnson comes here every month. She's picking up legitimate medication for her husband. I can show you the prescription. History, step back. Sir Harris points a warning finger at David, unless you want to join her in cuffs for interfering with police business. The threat hangs in the air. David's hands shake as he retreats, knowing that intervention could cost him his job, his livelihood, maybe his freedom. But every instinct screams that this is wrong. Around the pharmacy, phones emerge from purses and pockets. The businessman who was ahead of Margaret in line holds his device steady, recording everything. A teenage girl near the greeting cards whispers into her phone, "You need to see this. Some cop is arresting this old lady for literally nothing." Margaret's designer blazer wrinkles as Harris pushes her toward the front of the store. Her reading glasses hang crooked from their chain. One lens cracked from when he spun her around the prescription bottle. Robert's lifeline still lies scattered on the floor. Pills mixing with dust and debris walk. Harris commands his hand, gripping her elbow with unnecessary force. Each step sends jolts of pain through Margaret's arthritic knees. She stumbles once and Harris jerks her upright, without gentleness. The small crowd parts before them like water, some people backing away, others following with their cameras raised. "This is unbelievable," someone whispers. She's someone's grandmother, but Harris feels vindicated in his mind. He's done everything by the book. Suspicious behavior. Check. Possible drug trafficking. Check. Resisting cooperation. Check. His body camera has captured a clean arrest that will look good in his report. He doesn't notice the way Margaret holds herself. Despite the handcuffs, the straightness of her spine, the careful dignity in each four-step way she makes eye contact with witnesses, not in shame, but in something approaching pity. "My husband is expecting me home," Margaret says quietly as they near the store's entrance. "He'll worry if I'm late. Should have thought about that before you started dealing pills, Grandma." The automatic doors slide open, revealing the busy Piedmont Avenue sidewalk. More phones appear, a woman walking her dog. Stops and stares. A delivery driver parks his truck and pulls out his device to record. Harris guides Margaret toward his patrol car, parked illegally in a handicapped space. The irony isn't lost on anyone. Watching, Margaret notices the violation but says nothing. She's learned to pick her battles over 7 decades of life. You can't arrest her for picking up prescription medication. The voice belongs to Emily Clark, the young pharmacy technician who's followed them outside. Her voice cracks with emotion and inexperience, with confrontation. "Watch me," Harris replies. Opening the patrol car's rear door, the smell hits Margaret immediately. Stale sweat, fear, and disinfectant. The plastic seat is cracked and uncomfortable. Harris places his hand on her head, pushing down as she's forced to bend into the car. Careful with her. David Miller has also emerged from the store, his manager's badge still pinned to his shirt. She's 69 years old enough to know better. Harris shoots back. But as Margaret settles into the patrol car's back seat, something in her posture changes. The humiliation is still there, carved into the lines around her eyes. The pain from the handcuffs still shoots through her shoulders. But underneath it all, something else emerges. resolve. Margaret Johnson has spent 48 years of marriage protecting Robert from stress. She's spent decades navigating systems designed to dismiss women who look like her. She's learned patience, diplomacy, and the art of strategic silence. But she's also learned when enough is enough. Harris slams the car door, the sound reverberating across Piedmont Avenue through the window. Margaret can see the crowd that's gathered. Phone still recording witnesses to her humiliation. Some shake their heads in disgust, others look away, unwilling to confront the uncomfortable truth of what they're seeing. Harris walks around to the driver's seat, already composing his report in his mind. Drug trafficking, resisting arrest obstruction. Maybe he can add something about threats or suspicious behavior. Make it stick. He has no idea that the woman sitting handcuffed in his back seat has spent 24 years sentencing people exactly like him. And her patience has just run out. Harris settles into the driver's seat. Adjusting his radio volume, his dashboard computer glows with arrest forms waiting to be filled. Drug trafficking, easy paperwork, another stat for his monthly numbers. Officer Harris? Margaret's voice cuts through his administrative satisfaction. Her tone has changed, gone. Is the confused elderly woman. What remains is something else. Entirely. Harris glances in the rearview mirror. Save it for the badge lady. I am the judge. The words hang in the patrol car like a physical presence. Harris's hand freezes on his radio dial. What did you say I said? I am a federal judge retired from the Northern District of Georgia. 24 years on the bench. Harris turns around, studying Margaret's face through the metal grating that separates them. She sits straighter now, despite the handcuffs. Her cracked reading glasses catch the afternoon light, and behind them, her eyes hold something. Harris has never seen before in the back of his patrol car. Authority, you're lying, but his voice lacks conviction. Something in Margaret's posture and the way she speaks makes his stomach tighten with the first whisper of doubt. Run my name through your system, Margaret says calmly. Margaret Johnson, Federal Judicial Database. You'll find my commission papers, my security clearance, my retirement ceremony from 3 years ago. Harris's hand shakes slightly as he reaches for his computer terminal. This isn't possible. Federal judges don't get arrested for drug trafficking. Federal judges don't shop at Seeves pharmacies in handcuffs. Federal judges don't sit in the back seats of patrol cars. But as his fingers type, Margaret Johnson, Federal Judge Northern District into the database, the screen fills with information that makes his blood run cold. Judge Margaret M. Johnson appointed 2001, confirmed unanimously by the U.S. Senate. Presided over 47 cases specialized in federal criminal law, civil rights violations, and law enforcement misconduct. Law enforcement misconduct. Harris stares at the photograph on his screen. Younger, wearing judicial robes, but unmistakably, the same woman sitting handcuffed in his back seat. The woman he'd just arrested for drug trafficking, the woman he called Grandma and shoved against the pharmacy counter. This can't be right, he whispers, but his computer doesn't lie. Cross-references confirm everything: Federal Bureau of Investigation, security clearance, Secret Service protection and detail during high-profile cases, commendations from 3 U.S. attorneys. General Margaret watches his face in the rearview mirror as reality crashes over him. I have sentenced 17 police officers during my tenure. Officer Harris, corruption, civil rights violations, excessive force. I know your type very well. Harris's mouth opens, but no sound comes. His career, his pension, his future, everything he's worked for over 13 years in law enforcement suddenly balances on the edge of a cliff he didn't see coming. The handcuffs are quite tight, Margaret continues conversationally. I'd estimate that you have about 30 seconds before the crowd outside realizes what you've done. 48 people are recording this arrest on their phones by tonight. This will be national news. Harris looks through his windshield at the growing crowd. Phones still raised witnesses to what they now know is the arrest of a federal judge for picking up heart medication, the story that will end his story that. Career before dinner time. I didn't know, young Michael Harris. You didn't identify yourself. I shouldn't have needed to. Margaret's voice remained steady. Every person deserves basic dignity during police interactions, regardless of their profession or position. But you chose intimidation, violence, and humiliation instead. Harris's radio crackles with dispatch calls. Normal police business continues around them while his world collapses. His hands tremble as he reaches for the door handle. "Officer Harris," Margaret says as he prepares to exit the car, "before you remove these handcuffs, I want you to understand something very clearly." Harris pauses, his hand frozen on the door. This isn't over, this is just the beginning, and outside, the cameras keep rolling. Laura Adams receives the tip through a text from her nephew, a college student who saw the viral video spreading across social media. "Aunt Laura Kopp arrested federal judge at CVS. This is insane! You need to see this!" The Atlanta Journal-Constitution's investigative reporter has covered police misconduct for 8 years, but she's never seen footage quite like this. Her laptop screen fills with shaky cell phone video, an elderly black woman in handcuffs forced into a patrol car while witnesses scream protests. The audio quality is poor, but the visuals tell a brutal story. By 5:30 p.m., Laura has confirmed Margaret Johnson's identity through federal judicial records. 24 years on the bench. Hundreds of criminal cases, a reputation for fairness that crossed party lines, the last person who should be faced down in a pharmacy parking lot. Laura's first call goes to David Miller, the CVS pharmacy manager who witnessed everything. His voice shakes as he describes the arrest over the phone. Mrs. Johnson comes in monthly, same prescription, same insurance card, same polite conversation about her husband's health officer. Harris treated her like she was running a drug cartel. "Did you try to intervene?" "I tried to explain that she was a regular customer," Harris threatened to arrest me too. Laura takes notes on her laptop, building a timeline. 2:15 p.m. Margaret enters, CVS. 2:28 p.m. Harris arrives. 2:31 confrontation begins. 2:47 p.m. Arrest completed. 16 minutes from normal. Errand to national news story. Her second call goes to the Atlanta Police Department's Public Information Office. The response is predictably defensive. Officer Harris followed department protocol in investigating suspicious behavior related to potential prescription drug abuse. The department stands behind his actions, pending a full investigation. But Laura has been covering APD long enough to read between the lines. Pending investigation means damage control, suspicious behavior means they have no real justification. She requests Harris's personal file through open records. Law's APD has 72 hours to respond, but Laura knows bureaucratic delays when she sees them. This file will be heavily redacted if it comes at all. Her breakthrough comes from an unexpected source, Dr. Linda Reynolds. Margaret's physician calls Laura directly after seeing the news coverage. Medical ethics prevent her from discussing specifics, but she can confirm that Margaret has legal authority to pick up Robert's medications. Judge Johnson has been managing her husband's care since his stroke 6 months ago. She has medical power of attorney insurance authorization and pharmacy verification on file. There's nothing suspicious about her actions. Laura's next move requires more delicate navigation. She reaches out to former colleagues of Margaret's from the federal courthouse, retired attorneys, court clerks, and other judges, who worked with Margaret over 2 decades. The picture they paint destroys any narrative about suspicious behavior. Judge Margaret Johnson was known for punctuality, preparation, and unwavering ethics. She'd sentenced a lot of corrupt cops before, always with careful attention to evidence and fair sentencing guidelines. Margaret doesn't have a vindictive bone in her body, says retired District Attorney Charles Bennett. But she also doesn't tolerate abuse of power if Harris thinks this will blow over quietly. He's never dealt with Margaret Johnson by Wednesday morning. Laura has assembled a preliminary profile of Officer Michael Harris that makes her stomach turn through public records and anonymous sources within APD. A pattern emerges that department leadership clearly hoped would stay buried. Harris joined APD 13 years ago after washing out of the Georgia State Patrol Academy for attitude problems. His training officers noted excessive aggression and poor judgment under pressure. Red flags that someone ignored. The complaint started within his first year. Mrs. Dorothy Harris, 71, reported that Harris threw her to the ground during a traffic stop for an expired registration. Her daughter filed a formal complaint. APD's Internal Affairs Division found insufficient evidence after a 2-week investigation. 3 months later, Officer Anthony Rivera alleged Harris used a racial slur during a shoplifting arrest. The complaint was dismissed because no other officers witnessed the incident. Harris's body camera had mysteriously malfunctioned. The pattern continues for 13 years. Elderly defendants, minority families, petty violations, escalated to violent arrests. 13 formal complaints filed with Internal Affairs. 13 complaints dismissed or buried in bureaucratic procedures designed to protect officers rather than citizens. Laura's computer screen fills with case numbers, complaint forms, and incident reports that read like a masterclass in systematic racism disguised as police work. Harris didn't just profile Margaret Johnson. He's been profiling vulnerable people for over a decade. Wednesday afternoon brings Laura's most significant discovery through a source she can't name. She obtained CBS's complete security footage from Tuesday's incident. The cameras captured everything. Harris's body camera missed the timestamp shows, Harris checking his body camera twice during the confrontation, once when he first approached Margaret, and again when he placed her in handcuffs. Both times, he adjusted the angle away from his actions. Deliberate obstruction of evidence, but CVS's overhead cameras captured what Harris tried to hide. Margaret's calm demeanor throughout the encounter, her repeated attempts to explain her legitimate purpose. Harris is escalating aggression, despite her compliance. Most damning is the audio, while Harris claimed Margaret was acting suspiciously and resisting cooperation. The security footage shows a polite elderly woman following pharmacy procedures exactly as she had dozens of times before. Laura's investigation expands to Harris's arrest. Statistics through data request, she discovers. He leads District 2 in arrests of elderly defendants, a category that should be statistically rare. Harris's arrest rates for prescription-related offenses are triple the department average. The numbers tell a story. APD doesn't want to tell Harris doesn't just make arrests. He targets specific demographics for arrests. Elderly people, minorities. Anyone who seems unlikely to fight back, effectively a predator in a uniform protected by a system designed to shield bad cops from consequences. Thursday morning brings the smoking gun. Laura needs an anonymous email arrives with Harris's personal text messages from Tuesday afternoon, leaked by someone within APD, who's apparently tired of watching Harris destroy lives without consequences. Ian Kwa. Got a live one at CVS Piedmont Avenue, elderly black female time for arrest, num. 3:29 p.m. Easy target acquired. She won't even know what hit her. 2:52 p.m. Oops, might have messed up. Need a cover story. ASAP, the messages are verified through metadata analysis. Harris wasn't investigating suspicious behavior. He was hunting for easy arrests to meet quotas. Margaret Johnson wasn't a criminal suspect. She was prey. Laura's computer dings with another anonymous message, this one containing internal APD memos. From Captain Richard Lewis, Harris's direct supervisor. The subject lines alone tell the story. Arrest statistics need improvement and performance metrics. District 2 behind target. The memos reveal APD's quota system. In black and white, officers are evaluated on arrest numbers, not crime reduction or community safety. Harris has been gaming the system for years, targeting vulnerable populations who won't effectively challenge police reports. Margaret Johnson wasn't just unlucky, she was deliberately selected for humiliation because Harris thought a 69-year-old black woman would be powerless to fight back. Captain Lewis's response to Harris's mistake reveals the department's true priorities. Instead of disciplining Harris for false arrest, Lewis instructs him to craft incident reports carefully and emphasize the subject's non-compliance. Laura stares at her laptop screen, surrounded by evidence of systematic corruption that reaches far beyond one racist cop. APD's leadership knew about Harris's pattern. They enabled it, protected it, and planned to cover it up. But they didn't count on Margaret Johnson fighting back, and they certainly didn't expect a federal judge to have the knowledge, connections, and determination to expose their entire system. The war is just beginning, and Harris has no idea what he's unleashed by. Thursday evening, Atlanta Police Department's damage control machine kicks into high gear. Captain Richard Lewis calls an emergency meeting with department lawyers, public relations staff, and union representatives. The room smells of stale coffee and desperation. "We have a problem," Lewis announces, tossing printed screenshots of social media posts across the conference table. "The Johnson arrest is going viral. We need to contain this before it reaches national news." The first salvo comes through an internal memo marked Confidential Personnel Matter. Officer Harris is placed on administrative leave pending investigation, which everyone understands means paid vacation, while the department hopes public attention fades. Margaret Johnson reads the memo on Friday morning from her breakfast table, where Robert sips coffee with a trembling hand. His stroke has worsened since Tuesday's stress. The pills scattered across the CVS floor were his last dose before running out. "They think this ends here," Margaret tells Robert quietly. "Administrative leave, a few weeks of paid time off, then back to normal." Robert's speech slurs slightly. "What? What will you do?" Margaret folds the memo carefully. "What I've always done, follow the evidence wherever it leads." Margaret's phone rings, heavy breathing on the other end. Then a gravelly voice. "Drop this, Judge. You don't know who you're messing with." The line goes dead. Margaret writes down the time and caller ID information. Unknown number in her legal notebook. 40 years of judicial experience taught her that anonymous threats usually mean you're over the target. The harassment escalates through the weekend. Strange cars parked outside their townhouse hang up calls at odd hours. Someone leaves a dead rat on their front steps with a note. Snitches end up like this. Robert's anxiety spikes with each incident. His blood pressure readings worry. Margaret, more than the threats, she considers backing down, letting Harris return to duty, accepting the injustice to protect her husband's health. But Monday morning brings news that hardens her resolve. Laura Adams's investigation published in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution with devastating detail. Harris's 13-year pattern of abuse, the quota system, the cover-ups. APD's response is swift and vicious. Captain Lewis holds a press conference at 3:00 p.m., flanked by police union lawyers and department officials. His prepared statement is a masterclass in victim blaming, disguised as professional concern. After reviewing all available evidence, we find Officer Harris followed appropriate protocols in investigating suspicious behavior at a known location for prescription drug diversion. While we regret any misunderstanding with Mrs. Johnson, our officers must make split-second decisions to protect public safety. A reporter raises her hand. "Captain Lewis, how do you explain the text messages showing Harris's plan to target elderly suspects?" Lewis's jaw tightens. "We don't comment on alleged evidence that may have been obtained illegally. However, I will note that Mrs. Johnson has a history of anti-police bias in her judicial rulings. This appears to be a pattern of activism rather than legitimate complaint. The press conference is a declaration of war. APD isn't just defending Harris, they're attacking Margaret's reputation, her judicial record, her credibility. Tuesday brings an escalation. Robert collapses in their kitchen while making breakfast. Margaret finds him unconscious on the tile floor, a coffee mug shattered beside him. The paramedics rush him to Grady Memorial Hospital with blood pressure. Readings that threaten stroke or heart attack. Stress-induced hypertensive crisis. Dr. James Carter explains in the emergency room. Waiting area, his body can't handle the current pressure levels. We need to stabilize him immediately. Margaret sits beside Robert's hospital bed, watching monitors that measure his declining health. His hand feels fragile and hers a skin paper thin and cold. The cost of fighting injustice has always been high, but she never imagined it might cost Robert's life. Wednesday evening, Lewis makes a personal visit to the hospital. He arrives in uniform, projecting authority. Even in the cardiac care unit, nurses whisper as he passes, recognizing power when they see it. Judge Johnson Lewis says, settling into the visitor's chair uninvited, "I'm sorry about your husband's condition." Margaret studies his face, reading decades of police politics in his expression. "Are you here officially as captain?" "I'm here as someone who wants to resolve this situation quietly for everyone's benefit." Lewis places a folder on Robert's bedside table. "Harris made a mistake. We acknowledge that, but dragging this through federal court won't help anyone. Your husband needs peace and quiet. We can arrange early retirement for Harris, full pension, clean record. Everyone moves on in my humiliation, the pattern of abuse, the other victims." Lewis shrugs. "Sometimes justice isn't perfect, Judge. Sometimes it's about what's practical." Margaret opens the folder. Harris's resignation letter, presigned and dated a department statement calling the arrest an unfortunate miscommunication. No admission of wrongdoing, no systemic change, no acknowledgement of the dozen other victims who suffered in silence. 24 hours, Lewis says, standing after that. "This gets ugly for everyone involved." Margaret watches him leave, his polished shoes squeaking against hospital linoleum through Robert's window. She can see downtown Atlanta. Skyline, the federal courthouse where she spent 24 years defending justice against exactly this kind of corruption. Robert stirs in his sleep. Monitors beeping steadily. His medication schedule is finally stabilized, but his stress levels remain dangerously high. Margaret knows that accepting Lewis's deal would beep softly in the darkness, measuring a life hanging in the balance. His second heart attack came Tuesday night, 12 hours after Captain Lewis's hospital visit. The doctors call it a stress-induced cardiac event. Margaret calls it the price of standing up to power. Dr. James Carter delivered the news with clinical precision. Significant damage to the left ventricle. His recovery depends on eliminating stress factors immediately. Margaret holds Robert's hand, feeling how thin and fragile it's become. 48 years of marriage, and she's never seen him look so small. The stroke 6 months ago stole his words. This heart attack might steal everything else. "I'm sorry," she whispers to his sleeping form. "I'm so sorry. I dragged you into this." Robert's eyes flutter open, focusing slowly on her face. His mouth moves, trying to form words that won't come clearly. Margaret leans closer, straining to understand. "Fight," he manages to whisper. "Don't stop fighting." But Margaret isn't sure she has any fight left. The anonymous calls continue, despite the hospital security. Someone hacked their credit cards. Their insurance company is suddenly reviewing Robert's cardiac care coverage, questioning whether the treatments are medically necessary. The harassment extends beyond threats. APD's public relations campaign has been devastatingly effective. Online comment sections overflow with character assassination, disguised in as law and order. Rhetoric activist judge gets what she deserves, should have just complied with police orders. Why was she really at that pharmacy? The doubt seeps into Margaret's mind, despite her decades of experience with public scrutiny. Maybe Lewis was right. Maybe justice isn't worth Robert's life. Maybe some battles are too costly to fight. Thursday brings word that makes Margaret question everything she's believed about justice. The mayor's office announces support for APD's handling of the Johnson case. The police union schedules a rally supporting Harris. 3 city council members issue statements defending officers who risk their lives daily to protect citizens from drug trafficking. Margaret realizes she's not just fighting Harris anymore. She's fighting an entire system designed to protect corrupt cops at any cost, a system that will sacrifice her husband's health, her reputation, and her peace of mind to avoid admitting wrongdoing. Robert sleeps fitfully, monitors showing elevated stress levels even in unconsciousness. His body is shutting down under pressure that was supposed to be Margaret's burden alone. She holds his hand and faces the hardest decision of her life. Accept Lewis's deal and save her husband, or continue fighting and risk losing everything that matters most. For the first time since Tuesday's arrest, Margaret Johnson considers the possibility that justice isn't worth dying for outside Robert's window. Dawn breaks over Atlanta, and Margaret must choose between love and justice. Thursday afternoon brings an unexpected visitor to Robert's hospital room, Judge Susan Taylor. Margaret's former colleague from the federal courthouse arrives carrying a briefcase and wearing an expression of controlled fury. "I saw the mayor's press conference," Susan says without preamble. "What they're doing to you is unconscionable." Margaret looks up from Robert's bedside exhaustion, etched in every line of her face. "Susan, I appreciate you coming, but no." Susan's voice carries the same authority that commanded federal courtrooms for 18 years. "You're not doing this alone anymore." Susan opens her briefcase, revealing a stack of documents. 12 federal judges from our district. Signed to this letter, we're filing an amicus brief supporting your civil rights lawsuit, pro bono representation from a major law firm, full backing of the Federal Judges Association. Margaret stares at the papers, hardly daring to believe what she's reading. Names of respected jurists she's known for decades, lending their reputations to her fight. We've all seen Harris type before. Susan continues. Bullies and badgers who think federal judges are just old people they can intimidate today, they learned differently. Friday morning brings news that transforms Margaret's isolation into something resembling hope. Robert's room phone rings constantly with calls of support. Retired attorneys offering legal assistance, law school classmates sharing their own encounters with police misconduct. Former defendants whose cases Margaret handled fairly, regardless of their race or economic status. Dr. James Carter, Atlanta's most prominent civil rights attorney, arrives Friday afternoon with an offer Margaret can barely process. "My firm will handle your federal lawsuit at no cost. We've been waiting 20 years for a case this clear-cut." "I don't understand," and Margaret says, "Why would you? Because Harris arrested a federal judge for being black." "And Midtown?" Dr. Carter replies bluntly. "If that's not worth fighting, nothing is." Saturday brings the breakthrough that changes everything. David Miller, the CVS pharmacy manager, calls with news that makes Margaret's hand shake. "Judge Johnson, I found something. Harris came into our store 3 times last month, not for arrests, just walking around, watching customers, especially elderly customers. I have security footage of him studying people taking notes. The footage reveals Harris conducting surveillance. Building target lists. Margaret wasn't randomly selected. She was researched, profiled, and chosen for maximum humiliation. Sunday morning brings the most powerful support. Yet Dr. Dorothy Harris, the 71-year-old woman Harris assaulted during a traffic stop 3 years earlier, arrives at the hospital with her daughter and granddaughter. I never had the strength to fight him alone. Mrs. Harris tells Margaret. But I ain't alone anymore, and neither are you. Her story opens floodgates by Sunday evening. 7 other Harris victims have contacted Dr. Carter's office. Elderly defendants, minority families, vulnerable people who thought they had no voice against police power. Monday brings national attention. CNN picks up Laura Adams's investigation. The Washington Post editorial board condemns APD's handling of the case. Congressional representatives from Georgia demand federal oversight of Atlanta police practices. Robert squeezes Margaret's hand during Monday's evening news coverage. His speech has improved slightly with reduced stress medication. "Proud of you," he manages to whisper. Margaret looks around Robert's hospital room, now filled with flowers from supporters, legal briefs from colleagues, and contact information from dozens of people offering help for the first time since Tuesday's arrest. Margaret Johnson realizes she's not fighting alone anymore, and somewhere in Atlanta, Officer Harris is about to learn that attacking a federal judge was the worst mistake of his life. Tuesday morning, Laura Adams receives an encrypted email that changes everything. The sender identifies himself only as a friend in blue, with an Atlanta PD email signature that checks out through verification software. Harris isn't working alone. Check Officer Anthony Rivera's body camera from March 12th. Audio file attached. You'll want to hear this. Laura downloads the audio file with trembling fingers. Officer Anthony Rivera was Harris's partner, that Tuesday assigned to patrol Midtown's pharmacy district. His body camera was supposedly inactive during Margaret's arrest. The audio proves otherwise. Laura's laptop speakers crackle with crystal clear sound. Harris's voice recorded. 15 minutes before he entered the CVS, coordinating with Rivera through their patrol car radio target acquired at CVS Piedmont Avenue, elderly, black female alone. Reading prescription labels too carefully. Perfect stats, padding. Rivera responds, "Copy that. I'll maintain the perimeter, keep civilians back. When you make the arrest, remember, accidental camera malfunction if things get messy. Captain wants clean paperwork on this." Quota push. Laura rewinds the audio 3 times. Hardly believing what she's hearing. This wasn't a spontaneous arrest based on suspicious behavior. This was a planned operation, coordinated between 2 officers designed to manufacture arrests for statistical purposes. The audio continues with devastating clarity. "How do you want to play this?" Rivera asks, standard intimidation. Make her feel powerless, get compliance through fear. These elderly types always fold under pressure. What if she has legitimate prescriptions? Doesn't matter by the time she proves innocence, arrest stats are. Already logged captain only cares about numbers, not outcomes. Harris's laugh is audible through the radio static. Besides, who's going to believe some old black lady over a police officer? The system's rigged in our favor. Laura calls Dr. Carter immediately. "I have the smoking gun." Harris planned this arrest. Rivera was complicit. APD command structure knew about quota manipulation. The audio file reaches Margaret at 9:00 a.m. Through Dr. Carter's encrypted phone call, she listens in Robert's hospital room, watching her husband's face as Harris's words destroy any remaining doubt about his motivations. Elderly types always fold under pressure. Robert's blood pressure monitor shows his fury despite his weakened condition. "Bastards," he whispers with more clarity than he's managed in days, but the audio contains more than Harris's confession. In the background, dispatch radio reveals the scope of APD's corruption. 3 other elderly target arrests were logged that same afternoon, a systematic campaign against vulnerable populations. Laura Adams's investigation expands the audio evidence through digital forensics. Harris and Rivera have been coordinating these arrests for 18 months. 67 elderly defendants, 43 prescription-related charges, statistical manipulation designed to justify budget increases, and overtime pay. Margaret recognizes the legal implications immediately. This isn't just civil rights violation, it's criminal conspiracy under federal racketeering statutes. Harris Rivera and their commanding officers face potential federal prosecution. Wednesday morning brings confirmation that the audio is authentic through FBI digital analysis. Agent Jennifer Hayes calls Dr. Carter directly. This evidence supports federal charges against multiple APD officers. We're opening a criminal investigation. Captain Lewis learns about the audio Wednesday afternoon through APD's internal security breach investigation. Someone leaked Rivera's body camera files to the press. Lewis immediately calls an emergency meeting with union lawyers. We have a problem. Lewis tells the assembled officials. Harris's operation is blown. Federal charges are coming. We need complete separation from this disaster. Thursday morning, APD announces Rivera's suspension and Harris's termination for conduct. Unbecoming a police officer, no mention of federal investigation or criminal charges, but the message is clear. The department is cutting ties with both officers. Harris receives termination notice through certified mail after 13 years of protected misconduct. His career ends with a form letter and confiscated badge. But for Margaret Johnson, this isn't about Harris's career anymore. The audio evidence proves systematic corruption. Reaching through APD's command structure, individual justice has become institutional accountability. Federal agents are already preparing arrest warrants, and Harris's nightmare is just beginning. The Atlanta City Council emergency session convenes. Thursday evening at 7:00 p.m. in the packed municipal building. Every seat is filled. Cameras from news stations line the back wall. Margaret Johnson enters through the main doors at 7:23 p.m., walking slowly but steadily. Robert's arm linked through hers. Robert insisted on attending, despite his cardiologist protest. His speech remains slurred, his steps unsteady, but his presence beside Margaret sends a message that resonates through the chamber. This family will not be intimidated. City Council Chair Emily Brooks calls for order as the crowd settles into tense silence. This emergency session addresses recent allegations regarding Atlanta Police Department procedures and the arrest of Judge Margaret Johnson. Harris sits at the defendant's table, flanked by his union attorney and a court reporter. His face is pale, hands clasped tightly in front of him. Gone is the swagger. From the Tuesday's arrest, what remains is a man watching his life collapse in real time. Council member Brian Thompson speaks. First Officer Harris, you are under oath. Do you swear that your testimony will be truthful and complete? Harris raises his right hand. His voice cracks on the word yes after Dr. Carter stands to address the council, his voice carrying decades of courtroom authority. Council members, we present audio evidence that fundamentally alters the nature of this case. The chamber falls silent as Rivera's body camera audio plays through the sound system. Harris's voice fills the room with damning clarity. Target acquired elderly black female perfect stats padding. Gasps ripple through the audience. Several council members lean forward, studying Harris's reaction. His face drains of remaining color as his own words condemn him. These elderly types always fold under pressure. Robert Sanders squeezes Margaret's hand around them. Witnesses from Tuesday's arrest nod in recognition. David Miller, the CVS manager, shakes his head in disgust. Council Chair Emily Brooks addresses Harris directly. Officer, do you deny these are your words? Harris's attorney whispers urgently in his ear. The silence stretches for nearly 30 seconds before Harris speaks. While I was following departmental procedures for investigating suspicious Officer Harris. Margaret Johnson rises from her seat, her voice cutting through his stammered excuse. You called me a target, you planned my humiliation, you laughed about elderly people folding under pressure. The chamber erupts in murmurs as Margaret continues. For 24 years I sentenced officers who violated their oaths. I showed mercy when possible, severity when necessary. But I never encountered someone who took such pleasure in cruelty. Harris tries to respond, But Margaret isn't finished. You didn't see a suspicious person. Tuesday afternoon, you saw an opportunity to abuse power without consequences. You saw someone you thought was powerless. Margaret's voice grows stronger with each word, but power doesn't come from badges or handcuffs. It comes from the truth, and the truth is that you are a bully who hides behind a uniform to terrorize vulnerable people. Harris's attorney pulls him aside for whispered consultation. When they return to the table, Harris speaks in a barely audible voice. I resign from the Atlanta Police Department, effective immediately. The chamber erupts in cheers and applause, but Margaret remains standing, her judicial composure intact. Resignation is not justice, she declares. Federal charges are pending. Other victims deserve accountability. This ends when the system changes, not when one officer quits. Council Chair Brooks gavels for order as Harris stands to leave. Camera flashes illuminate his walk toward the exit, documenting his fall from authority to disgrace. But as Harris disappears through the chamber doors, Margaret knows this victory is just the beginning of real change. 6 months later, Margaret Johnson picks up Robert's heart medication at the same CVS on Piedmont Avenue. The prescription number remains unchanged, RX 4471892, lisinopril 10. Milligons take 1 daily with food, but everything else has changed. David Miller greets her with a warm smile, thinking about Robert's recovery. No suspicious glances, no second-guessing her purpose, just normal courtesy extended to a regular customer. Michael Harris sits in federal prison, serving 18 months for civil rights violations and conspiracy. Rivera received 12 months. Captain Richard Lewis took early retirement after FBI investigation revealed departmental quota, corruption reaching back 5 years. Robert's health improved dramatically once stress subsided. His speech has returned to near normal clarity. His smile is brighter, his hands steadier. As he waits in their car outside Atlanta PD, implemented new policies prohibiting arrest quotas and requiring supervisor approval for prescription-related arrests. Harris's 13 victims received settlement payments ranging from $50,000 to $200,000, but Margaret's greatest victory sits in her passenger seat, humming softly to the radio, alive and recovering. Sometimes justice wears reading glasses and carries heart medication. Sometimes it speaks 5 words that change everything. Sometimes it requires an elderly woman to teach powerful people about real strength. Margaret Johnson proved that dignity cannot be handcuffed. Truth cannot be silenced. Injustice delayed but never denied always finds its way. Your voice matters, your story matters. When you see injustice, speak up.